Your pelvic floor holds your organs, like your bowel, your bladder, your uterus. So that's why during pregnancy, your pelvic floor does need to be strong to support these things. But it also doesn't mean that the leaking, the constipation, the pain, those types of things are normal. It just means that your body just needs some help and some assistance with the changes that are taking place. And it's also responsible for pleasure. So if you cannot reach orgasm or you have a really difficult time, it could maybe not just be your partner, it could be your pelvic floor as well. And so this is something that can be addressed too. So that's really important to know, because if your pelvic floor isn't like at its optimal function, it can make it harder for you to reach pleasure.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life in marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I am super excited about this episode. I know I say that about every guest episode, but I really mean it, because we're going to be talking about something that plagues probably most, if not all, moms, and that is pelvic floor issues. You know, like when you jump on a trampoline and you squirt a little pee out? Well, apparently you don't have to feel that. You don't have to experience that. As soon as I met Becca and I saw that she was a pelvic floor coach, I was like, you have to be on my show. So welcome, Becca. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing what you're about to share. I think so many people out there are going to be like, wait, let me turn this up louder. Let me pause this. Let me rewind this. Let me listen back to this again. So thank you for joining us. Can you share with us what you do, where you're from, how old your kids are? Just give us a good overview of what makes you you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I truly think this is something so important, even just for moms to know, you don't have to suffer with X, Y, and Z, and we'll dive into more of what that is. But a little bit about me is I am from Michigan. I have 2 kiddos. My son is 4 and my daughter is 2. And there will be no more. They are our whole life. I got started with pelvic floor about just under a year after my son was born. And when I first took my first certification for it, I was like, oh my gosh, and it sounds crazy, but I fell in love, because it was all of those misconceptions that we're going to share today that I'm like, I'm going to go to shout this from the rooftop. Every single person I know has to know about this. And so many things that I was doing that were quote unquote wrong or potentially harmful to me and my pelvic floor and just quality of life. So from there, I just dove further into it, and I actually started more specialization within pregnancy and postpartum and giving birth and things like that. And that all kind of stemmed from my own birth experiences. I had a traumatic first birth that ended in a cesarean, and I actually ended up having a VBAC. Those that don't know, that's a vaginal birth after a cesarean at 41 weeks, and I was not induced. So it was truly an amazing experience. So just allowing moms to be able to experience that the first time and not having to have that traumatic experience is really important to me, but also knowing these problems sometimes stem within pregnancy or even before. And so catching them early on can really help limit pain during pregnancy. It can improve your birth experience. And then all those postpartum things that we suffer with, like pain or crossing our legs when we cough or sneeze, or we can't jump on the trampoline with our kids, or, any of those types of things. So that is a bit about me. Super excited to share some more information and educate some moms.
Yeah. Okay. So before we dive into misconceptions and, what society has defined as normal when it comes to what your body's like after you give birth, Can you walk us through what the hell is even a pelvic floor?
Yes. Yeah, because so often, well, also the misconception too is like, oh, pelvic floor, you just do Kegels. Like,
Oh my gosh, I've heard
Yeah.
that so many times.
Yes.
When you're at a stoplight, do your Kegels.
After listening to this, you are no longer going to do Kegels at a stoplight. That is,
Yay! Not that I do it, but I at one point was doing it because I was like, oh, I need to do this.
Well, and we'll talk about why we don't do that. But your pelvic floor essentially are the muscles that make up like your vaginal canal. So they are internally located. So if you were to go see somebody in person and they do an assessment on you, they do an internal assessment, but this is far less invasive and painful and all the things you can imagine than a pap smear. It's very minimal. Like, you're in charge of this exam that you do, and I don't want anyone to fear that. So if they do end up going to see somebody in person, I want you to know that that does take place, but it should not be feared and like the reason you don't go, because I promise you'll be leaving feeling so much more like relief and at ease with everything. But that is your pelvic floor. It's not just like one muscle. It is actually 3 layers of muscles, and each layer has several different muscles within them. So that is also really important. Your glutes and like your muscles through your hips and things like that, they all work with your pelvic floor. So, if you have really tight glutes, like a lot of moms do, because we stand with our bums tucked and we don't really use our muscles how we should be. And so that can contribute to pelvic floor things too. And I don't know if I hate the term, but like quote unquote mom butt, like everyone's like, oh, I got pregnant, I had kids, and now my butt's like gone. It's really just because of how we stand and like do things, and then how we use our muscles. So if that is you, don't feel like you're stuck with that. Like it can be addressed. Your pelvic floor can be addressed, and things like that. But one of the reasons why you don't just do Kegels, one, you might not be someone who doing Kegels is going to help you. If you have a tight pelvic floor, which more women do than you realize, and just doing Kegels, think about like Popeye doing a ton of biceps, like curls, right? Like, you know what I mean? That is what you're doing to your pelvic floor. And so you're creating even more tightness and tension, and now you're leaking more, or you have more pain, and you're like, I'm doing all the Kegels in the world. I stop at every light. Like, this is happening. And so that's a huge misconception. So it's not just Kegels. But the other side of that is like 90% of women don't do Kegels the right way. So I actually don't even use the terminology Kegels, because trying to reteach your brain what it is a lot harder than like teaching you a new skill. So if you ever work with me or you ever see that my material, content, things like that, I always just say pelvic floor contraction, which is a mouthful. I get that. But it's way easier for you to like adjust how you are doing things when you are learning a new skill, opposed to like correct a skill that you've been doing for so long. So, and then on the other side too, who actually teaches us how to do a Kegel? Like no one teaches us our pelvic floor. No one tells us how it works, what to do, what to feel. Like we're just left like after childbirth, like, see ya, good luck, and there's no education, there's no help, there's no healing. And then some moms are 8, 10, 15 years postpartum and they're still struggling with back pain, hip pain, leaking, like all of these other things. Or maybe they have pain with sex and they just think it's their normal because they had babies, but it's not. So we'll just put that out there. That is not normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane how, leading up to you having a baby, you have like 1,000,001 appointments. And then as soon as the baby's out, it's like, okay, you get shoved off to the side. It's all about the baby now. Is the baby eating enough? Is the baby pooping enough, peeing enough? Let's look at the weight. Meanwhile, we're dealing with our own healing process, which no one tells you, like, hey, this is the best way to do that. These are the things that you need to fill up on so that you can restore your nutrients. These are the things that you need to do to help your pelvic floor.
Yeah, for sure.
All of that. It's just like, no, just go breastfeed them.
Yeah. And make sure they sleep, but you don't get to sleep. And
no. Yeah. Yeah. What the hell? And then they have that, questionnaire. It's like, okay, you're good, which some people lie about because, they're not comfortable revealing how they actually feel, or maybe they're not even aware. So I have a very big gripe on postpartum care
oh my gosh.
for women. So unless you can afford like a a doula, like a postpartum doula,
Yeah.
then it's like, sorry, you're screwed. You're just out there fending for yourself unless you land on some like Instagram page that's offering you insight and advice.
Yeah.
Like, you're on your own.
You really are. And even if you do land on that, you're out there searching for it. No one is like
Mm-hmm.
helping you to it. It's just
Yes.
like you said, even at the 6 weeks, it's like, oh, you're good. You know how many moms don't even get like examined at all?
What?
Yeah, like I'm in so many Facebook mom groups, and they're like, I thought they'd like check things out. They didn't. They just were like, yeah, you're good. I'm like, they
Wow.
didn't put their hands on you at all. They didn't check like what are we doing? What is
Yeah.
happening? And I know that's not like the majority. I hope that's not the majority,
Oh,
but that is
yes.
happening. And it's like, and also you get the questionnaires at 6 weeks, but what about 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
Postpartum is not just like a short little 6 to 12 weeks. Postpartum is a long, it's forever in a way, you know?
Well, and you're so like, you are so in the thick of it. You haven't even had a time to figure out how you feel or how you're doing because you're just in go, go, go mode, you know? So, like, yeah, to your point, 6 to 8 weeks, like you're still trying to figure out this breastfeeding thing. If that's what you're doing, you're
Yeah.
still trying to figure out your new routine and their sleep schedule and all that. Like, mom has not even taken the time to ask herself, am I okay? Like,
No,
she's
seriously.
exhausted. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yep. It's so true. It's so true. And this is why, again, we could go, I feel like you and I could just go on this whole postpartum tangent forever.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's,
Okay, so tell me more about, other issues that maybe moms out there don't know are related to their pelvic floor because yeah, there's like that hot phrase pelvic floor, but a lot of us don't actually know like what is our pelvic floor for? Like what is
yeah.
its function?
Yeah.
And why does it start to function differently or have dysfunction because of childbirth? And let us know if there's a difference between whether you have a vaginal birth or cesarean as
Yes,
well.
this is great because there's misconceptions with that. But first, let's start with like what your pelvic floor is responsible for because there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that your pelvic floor is responsible for. For instance, all bathroom habits, peeing, pooping, your pelvic floor actually has to relax and get out of the way so you can do these things because that allows that sphincter or that thing that opens up to allow things to come through. So this is why, here's a little misconception. If you are a hoverer, if you hover over the toilet, you are pushing through your pelvic floor. And so you can create some pelvic floor dysfunction if you do this consistently and over time. So when you sit down, you're signaling to your brain and your body to allow that to relax, and that's what happens. But there's other things that can happen too, like if you have a hard time emptying your bladder or things of that nature. There is help that can be done or things that you can do to help feel like you fully like relieved yourself. Your pelvic floor can be a cause or a contributing factor to like constipation and things of that nature. So that's really important. So your pelvic floor holds your organs like your bowel, your bladder, your uterus. So that's why during pregnancy, your pelvic floor does need to be strong to support these things. But it also doesn't mean that the leaking, the constipation, the pain, those types of things are normal. It just means that your body just needs some help and some assistance with the changes that are taking place. And then and it's also responsible for pleasure. So if you cannot reach orgasm or you have a really difficult time, it could maybe not just be your partner, it could be your pelvic floor as well. And so this is something that can
Wow.
be addressed too. So that's really important to know because if your pelvic floor isn't like at its optimal function, it can make it harder for you to reach pleasure, and so that can be addressed and it's not surgical. Like these things aren't like, oh, I need a bladder sling or I've got to go have like so many things are just like, oh, let's just give you a hysterectomy. And then it's like, I still have all this pain. Well, yeah, because now you have a hysterectomy. We didn't do any pelvic floor work and all your organs are shifting and moving and your pain is still there. And it actually breaks my heart. That's also a huge soft spot that I have and I've treated is post hysterectomies, whether it's within the last year or it was several years ago, because they're not getting that care that they need after that surgery. But that's another part of your pelvic floor. The misconceptions with cesarean versus vaginal is I had a cesarean, my pelvic floor is fine. No. I could almost argue that cesarean mamas need pelvic floor almost more. Almost. because one, your pelvic floor helped you carry your baby upwards of 10 months, right? Upwards. And then you just had a major abdominal surgery. And you're expected to get up and move and do these things. Your pelvic floor makes up the bottom of your core. So it helps support your core in a sense. So if your core now is compromised because you just had this major abdominal surgery, guess what has to pick up the load and do all the extra work? And so now you go to have sex at 6, 8, 10, 12, months later when you choose that you're ready and you're having pain. And you're like, what the heck? I had a cesarean. Like, why does my vagina hurt? And it doesn't have to be that way. I actually had a mom who messaged me and she was like, I wish people would have told me that if you have a cesarean, you can still have pain with sex. She's like, this is terrible. And so we kind of chatted and things. But there's just this huge misconception that cesareans have no pelvic floor involvement. They're totally fine. Their vaginas will be the same and never change. And that's just not the case. You can still have problems arise because of having that surgery and stuff. And then vaginally, right? Like you can tear, which can be scary, but if you do tear, there's still help for you. Like it doesn't mean that your quality of life or you're going to have to pee your pants or poop your pants or any of these crazy things, like, or prolapse. Like it doesn't have to be that way. We can fix that, but we can also educate you and limit like the things we can control during labor and birth, and we can limit that tearing and that trauma that arises in birth too. So pelvic floor isn't just like I have something wrong with me and I need it fixed. It is also like preparation, prevention, that type of thing. Any type of like abdominal surgery or hysterectomy or things like that really should see a pelvic floor therapist following. And a big thing too is cesarean moms don't often touch their scar. It's kind of something, maybe it's triggering, maybe it's painful, whatever it may be, they never touch their scar. And then this leads to problems too, because that scar tissue adheres to the healthy tissue beneath. And now your body has a harder time doing what it's supposed to be doing. Or it has that like really sensitization where you can't wear pants or whatever. And you're like now 5, 6, 7 or a year down the road and you're still having pain in your incision. So doing some like desensitization, which would be like a really soft towel or blanket and just touching that on your scar first until you're comfortable with it. And then progressing to be able to use your fingers or your hands on your scar to kind of help break up that scar tissue is really important. So that's some misconceptions about the tubers.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, I know that I'm new to like learning about pelvic floor stuff, but like I'm very surprised that you shared some things I have never ever heard of. I want to kind of go back to the tearing, and so like my experience with my first son, I did experience like a violation. I don't know if that's what you would call it. I was pissed. Yeah. My doctor, actually she wasn't even my doctor. She was just like the person that was working that night when I was delivering. Yeah. So I actually met her once because she filled in during one of my OB appointments, and I was like, wow, this woman has no bedside manner. I really hope I don't get her when I deliver. And of course,
isn't that the worst?
Got her.
Yep.
And okay, so I was not pushing for very long. I was pushing for all of, I think he came out in 20 minutes. Okay. Anyway, she decided to cut me and didn't ask me. Didn't even tell me that she was doing that. And I only knew because all of a sudden I see her hand raising up in the air with string. And I'm like, oh, are you stitching me up? Did I tear? She goes, oh no, I cut you. I'm like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Like, it's not like I was there for a long time. You could have coached me on how to push, right? You could have asked me, hey, do you want me to cut you instead? But no, none of that happened. Anyway, fast forward to my first appointment back, like where they, quote unquote, check you. They're like, oh yeah, you healed beautifully. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm cleared to have sex again. And I don't remember how long after that appointment I decided I was okay to have sex, but it hurt for months. And I'm like, but my doctor said I was fine. So even an OB/GYN checked me out, said nothing looked wrong. And yet my experience didn't match what she said. What happened there?
Yeah. So first I want to address the cutting, because this also pisses me off. There's so many other people out there who advocate for it. You had an episiotomy. Episiotomy should never be done without consent. Period. End of story, exclamation point. Like it's consent. Everything that happens in our bodies during pregnancy, and I might get on, I'm going to try to keep reining this in, should be consensual. Cervical checks should be consensual. Episiotomies should be consensual, and you do not have to have. It is better for your body to tear than to be cut. And I'm actually doing labor coaching for this month. And that's one of the things I'm teaching is how to push before you get there, because you shouldn't be pushing for hours and hours and hours. That is not what should be happening. If anything, you should push for, like you said, 20 minutes or less, honest to goodness. And you might not even have to push that long, because that also can lead to things. Your body is made for giving birth. Your pelvis is movable. Your pelvis is not a fixed entity that your baby now has to somehow fit through. Your pelvis moves to allow them to fit through each stage of your pelvis. And there's like the top of your pelvis, the middle of your pelvis, and the bottom of your pelvis. So that's huge. I know there might not be a lot of expecting moms listening, but maybe you can help a mom out in telling them this type of thing, which also means big babies are not a reason to not have, unless you want it. Everything should be consensual in what you want. Nothing should be forced on you. Nothing should be you are in charge of your body and your birth and your experience. But if you don't know how to advocate for yourself, then how do you advocate for yourself? So that's my little rant on that. Moving on from there, though, if you do have a tear or an episiotomy, or maybe you don't, most people think after they have a baby, their vagina is loose. And this is actually one of the biggest misconceptions, because what happens is your pelvic floor, it does not do any pushing. Your pelvic floor has to move out of the way to allow baby to come through. And so a lot of times when you're healing and you're coming back, your pelvic floor is like a hypertonic state, or like a state of like tension and tightness. Because now I was like, what the heck just happened to me? I'm trying to heal and trying to move. So there's ways to help support your pelvic floor during that time. But sometimes it doesn't get addressed. And so that can lead to pain on itself, that tightness and that tension, because tight muscles, like if you were to do a really heavy workout, like your muscles get sore, especially if you touch them. And now here you are trying to have sex and they're being touched and they're not happy about it. The other thing too is with an episiotomy or tearing, you also have scar tissue. And so just like you would do a perineum massage before, like to prepare for labor and birth, you still kind of have to do a little bit of a massage or some sort of addressing that scar tissue, because you don't want it to stick to the healthy tissue, because then it causes the pulling and tightness and tension. And a lot of times moms explain this as like the first 5 minutes is really painful, like when they insert, and that's what they explain. And they're like, but once we get going, it's fine. And that's because the scar tissue and things are able to relax and kind of move out of the way and be a little bit more like mobile. So that is something that you can kind of address. Just like a cesarean, you have to touch your scar. It can be very similar with a vaginal birth too, especially with having the tearing or an episiotomy taking place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really upset me that happened. And then the whole sex thing, I was like, what the hell's going on?
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because you're relearning your body, right? Yeah.
Well, that too, because, after birth, you kind of feel like, oh, what is happening down there? I don't know.
It's scary.
Everything is just sticking out.
Yeah. It's
I mean, I get it. It went through a lot, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear that there are things that could be done. And so, mamas out there, if you are looking to grow your family some more, or you're already in the process, there are things that you can do that aren't invasive and that can help you prepare for birth and heal better, more efficiently, effectively, that you might not be learning about from the doctor. Because I know, I certainly didn't get any
of
that holistic information.
Yeah. It's few and far between, even now. That is one of the biggest reasons I just took to social media, because I'm like, I am tired of talking to doctors and I'm dealing with insurance companies and blah, no. So I just was like, moms are the ones who need to know this. So I'm just going to, and that's kind of what I've just been doing, because ultimately moms are the ones making the decisions and need the information to make decisions. And if we don't have the education, how the heck do we make a decision that is appropriate for us? And that's a huge piece of it too. So it's wild.
Okay. Can you talk to me about prolapse?
Yes.
Because I know that is a huge thing
Mm-hmm.
in postpartum world.
Prolapse can be a few different things because your pelvic floor holds in your bowel, bladder, uterus.
Right.
Okay. So what can happen is your uterus can fall through into the vaginal canal. Your bladder can fall through into the vaginal canal.
Oh, wow.
And your rectum can fall through. You can have like a rectocele, which would be more like anus type of thing. And you can have a prolapse in that way. It can happen during pregnancy. It can happen postpartum. It can be helped though. It can be helped. There's things that you can do to minimize the symptoms. There's things you can do to improve the symptoms. There's things you can do to limit the risk of prolapse. A lot of it can take place during pregnancy. Some of it can take place postpartum, that type of thing. There's also people who've experienced prolapse who've never had a baby.
What? How?
So, yeah. So, because they had something or another take place where they had a lot of pressure or something build up and their pelvic floor wasn't helping to support them. And so now we have prolapse. I actually had, I can't remember her specific story, but she never had babies. She wanted to expand her family, but she was just having some fertility issues and things like that. But she came to us with a prolapse. She had like, so there's stages of prolapse, like 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, it's like very obvious, like you can very well see it. It's like all the way in your vaginal canal, that type of thing.
Wow.
And prolapse can be seen or like explained, if you're not sure if you have it, now you're freaking out because I don't want anyone to be freaking out, is a lot of pressure sometimes. And a lot of times it's more pressure at the end of the day because you've been standing, you've been moving, gravity has done its work, and now the prolapse feels more so at the end of the day. And so that can be a huge piece to recovering as well.
Wow.
This is why that like 0 to 6 weeks, in my opinion, is so important for moms. Because sure, you're not working out, you're not like, you're not doing any of those things necessarily, but you still have to get up off the couch, you still have to get out of bed, you have to potentially walk upstairs. Now you maybe have to carry the car seat, which is, sometimes with the baby in the car seat, like 20 pounds, like maybe you're lifting laundry baskets or groceries. And if you don't know how to utilize your core and your pelvic floor and protect your body, this is where prolapse is going to happen. Because if your pelvic floor isn't like working how we want it to, then instead of feeling protected when you go to lift those things, everything's going to just kind of fall down. And that's the best way I can explain it in like a layman's terms. But I also don't want to scare anybody either. But it is really important. Those 0 to 6 weeks are so important to just help heal your body and do things to help prevent things like the prolapse, the leaking, if you're peeing when you don't want to, the pain, back pain, hip pain, pain with sex. Like I probably shouldn't be having sex 0 to 6 weeks, but when you feel ready and you do, there's things that you can do to help support yourself so you're not in as much pain.
Yeah. Okay. So in my culture, I am Chinese. I didn't do this, by the way, just because I would go nuts. But after you have a kid, you're not supposed to leave the house for the first 30 days because you are purely focusing on recovering. And then there are certain things that they want you to eat, right? And so my family brought over lots of things like collagen-rich foods, things that will help like the internal makeup of your body, just like promote healing.
Yeah, for sure.
As a pelvic floor specialist,
yeah,
what are your thoughts on that of not leaving the house for 30 days? Like, because you said, okay, like limit what you do, right?
Yep.
Because you don't want to encourage prolapse, use your core. But what if you're just like not very active at all? Like, what if you have a village around you and they're literally doing everything for you and you're just sitting around or laying down the whole time? Is there any detriment to the pelvic floor doing that?
Not necessarily, but there should, like, you should still, let's see if I can explain this the best way I can. There should still be some sort of reconnection with your body after you have a baby, right? Like you just spent upwards of 10 months growing this child, and now there's no baby in there and your body's trying to adapt and find its new normal. And so during that time, you don't necessarily have to be leaving the house or doing anything crazy, but some breathing. I always breathing is one of the most important things you can do. And it sounds crazy, but a lot of moms also breathe wrong.
I believe it.
Which is just in a way where we're just causing maybe the potential for some dysfunction later, or just some things that can go on later, especially when we wear super tight pants and we don't allow the full expansion of our bellies or our pelvic floor or our bras, because you can never find one that fits right postpartum, and it's really restrictive and you don't have that room. So now your diaphragm is restricted. That's important too. So your diaphragm and your pelvic floor they work together as well. So for the first 30 days, if you're not doing anything, but let's say sitting on the couch, it's not necessarily a detriment, but you probably are going to have now some aches and pains because you're allowing healing, but you're also not really allowing that movement that helps you
blood
heal.
flow.
Yeah. And muscles will become tight and tense. They'll get used to a certain position or a certain thing. And so now you just might have a different side of things.
Okay.
I do somewhat like the 3-3-3 rule, if you've ever heard that, which is 3 days in your bed, which if you think about how long you stay in a hospital, it potentially is your hospital stay or your hospital stay in your first day or two home, but you're in your bed with your baby, skin to skin contact if you can. You're just trying to figure out, if you are nursing, how to do that, just kind of resting and just doing what you can. Hopefully people are bringing you food, water, etc. And then 3 days on your bed. So you're still low key, but you're now able to kind of sit up and move more and do that type of thing. And then 3 days around your bed. So you're doing light activity, right? Maybe you decide that I need to do something. I'm going crazy. I'm going to fold this laundry. I don't know who would ever want to do that, but something of that nature. So it's kind of like that, week to 2 week of allowing your body to heal and do things. But in that time, that doesn't mean you're not doing anything. When I work with postpartum moms, I'm we are going to do some breathing, laying down flat. You're going to do some breathing sitting. You're going to do some pelvic tilts, some mobility, because if you are nursing and you're hunched over all the time, you all of a sudden have tightness and tension through your back and everything. So you want to open things up and have less pain in that area. I remember when I first had my son, for the first week or two, I felt like I just worked out arms for days and days at a time. I was he's 7 pounds, 8 pounds. It was just, and it was that.
But it's a constant.
Yeah. And I was just wow. And it was the first week too. It just felt like I had worked out just arms and chest and back for just repetitively, and just never had that but you don't get that with your second because you're used to it by your second. And so it's different.
Yes.
And didn't have that, but that does happen. So learning how to move though too, because if you're standing up, you have to be able to protect everything. Because if you stand up but your insides fall down, that's the best way I can explain it. We don't want that to happen. We don't want them to fall too far, right? We want to be able to help support them. The first bathroom after you go to the after you have a baby.
Oh my gosh, so scary.
Right? So let's teach you how to go to the bathroom the right way, so you don't have as much pain and as much difficulty. And let's still keep our stool soft and things like that. So there's a lot of things that we go through as moms.
Oh my gosh. I remember I was told, get all the stuff that they'll give you and ask for more at the hospital. So I was like, can I have extra dermaplast? Can I have extra, postpartum underwear? Can I have
Yeah. And they'll fill those bags up for you. With diapers, wipes, all the things.
It was awesome. It was the best party favor ever.
Yeah. They will.
Yeah, having that first poo was oh, I don't want to. Do I have to?
It's terrifying. It is terrifying.
But it didn't end up as bad as I thought, because I was taking the stool softeners that they give you prior to you, giving birth.
Yeah.
And I had the dermaplast. I was okay, I'm ready. But I'm not going to push, forcefully push. I'm just going to allow it. I was okay, deep breaths. How can we relax?
Well, and that's how we should poop anyway. If you are holding your breath and bearing down while you poop.
Oh man.
Let's not be doing that anymore.
Hemorrhoids.
Yeah. You're talking about hemorrhoids. You're talking about it's just breathe out, get your squatty potty, and utilize your core in a sense to help push that out. just like your baby. It's just like labor. That's how I teach moms to push during labor. If you do go to a point and you're ready to push, you're breathing out. Don't hold your breath. Your body needs oxygen. Your baby needs oxygen. And I was like, if you need to practice, when you poop, you're going to sit on the toilet and you're going to practice, because that's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, same action. Yeah.
And then like hemorrhoids postpartum, if you're still pooping like that, you're going to have hemorrhoids up the wazoo. Like, it's going to be painful.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Motherhood is so beautiful.
We're talking about all the terrible things about motherhood. It is beautiful. It is. Just maybe not these things.
And it's super gross at the same time. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing all this. I personally learned a lot. I'm not having any more kids, though. I made sure my husband took care of that because, thank you. But I know many of you listeners out there maybe are still in the process of growing your family. So I hope that this episode helped you. I know I wish I knew all this stuff before having kids. So I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing all this information. Can you share with our listeners, where is the best place to find you if they're like, okay, I got to learn more from Becca. She really knows her stuff, and I want to make sure I have a different experience this time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, for starters. I really enjoyed this. And I think the best way right now is social media, typically Instagram. If you hop in my DMs, I can get back to you relatively quickly. It is just Pelvic Floor Mama, and it's MOMMA. Or you can send me an email, and it's just info@pelvicfloormama.com, and I can get back to you there. I do have some programs for pregnancy, labor, and postpartum, and I do also offer like one-on-one coaching. So we can kind of customize what you need and what is going to make you feel prepared and at ease, no matter what stage of life you are in.
Amazing. Okay, so before I let you go, I love to ask my guests a fun question so listeners can get to know you better. Are you ready?
Sure. A little nervous.
Okay. Don't be nervous. It's nothing crazy. So I have been binging a couple shows lately.
Okay.
The first one is Nobody Wants This. If you haven't watched it,
I'm going to have to add that.
What are you doing?
What platform is that on?
It's on Netflix.
Okay.
So it's this new series that came out. And do you remember the OC?
Yes, I do.
So Seth, Adam Brody is in it. And so is Kristen Bell.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They're both starring in it.
Okay.
She is a podcaster with her sister. Not her real sister, but in the show.
I think I just watched the first episode of this.
Yeah, he's a rabbi.
Yes, I just watched the first episode. Okay, yes. I'll keep this on my list. Yes, because I thought it was a movie, and then I was like, oh wait, this is a show.
No, it is amazing. I'm definitely going to go back and watch it a second time around because it was just so amazing and so like reminiscent of like really good rom-com.
Yeah,
from back in the day.
It's hard to find sometimes.
So hard. Anyway. And I also just got into the newest season of Love is Blind. So my question to you is, what is a trashy TV show that you've been into lately?
I don't have time for a lot of TV, honestly. But as you're talking, like the one show I could just watch on repeat and I'm obsessed with is Suits. And it's not a trashy. It is just so good. Like it just... My husband and I finished it probably a couple months ago, and we like moved to something else. I'm like, we can go back to Suits. Like I'm obsessed with it.
It's so good.
I love like One Tree Hill. I will always go back to like my Gilmore Girls.
Did you know they're making a remake?
I did,
or not a remake, but like a part 2.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what happens with that. I feel like they just shouldn't mess with a good thing, but I guess we'll see. And
I heard Chad Michael Murray isn't coming back.
Interesting. I used to be obsessed with him growing up, and then I learned like he's really not that like that guy you want to be obsessed with,
Yeah, no.
What? He was in all my favorite like shows and movies, and
yes,
I did like him in One Tree Hill, but obviously Naley is like where it's at.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Listeners, thanks for making it all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this and that you can start to integrate what it is that you heard on the show in your life to improve your pelvic floor health. And if you love this, please reach out to us and let us know what your favorite part about this episode was, so we know, because we always love to hear from our listeners, because we're out here just talking to each other as we're recording this. We have no idea that you're listening. So let us know. Let's have a conversation about it. And if you know someone that could benefit from listening to this episode, please share, right? Sharing is caring. And if you love the show, I love you back. Please leave a rating and review on iTunes and Spotify. I would really love you if you do that, because that is probably one of the best ways that you can promote this show and get more people to learn about the show and improve their life, their marriage, and their experience of motherhood. Well, thank you again, Becca. I will catch you all back here in the next episode. Bye.
That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.